I'm Janine Birchie Johnson, Director of Campus Ministries at AMBS and also Alumni Director. And I want to welcome you to this event recognizing Ann Garber Kompaore as one of the 2020 recipients of AMBS's Alumni Ministry and Service Recognition. We are delighted that all of you could join us from many parts of the world. Ann is nearing the end of 2 months that she's been spending in Canada. Part of that time she's been able to be with her mother. She'll be returning to Burkina Faso at the end of this week. So we're glad that we could do this event while she's on the same time zone as more people here. If you prefer to have a bigger picture of whoever is speaking, you can go up to the right corner of your screen and select speaker view. If you prefer to see everyone, you may use gallery view. And now David Buschert, President of Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary, will present the award to Ann.
Greetings. It's an honor to be able to offer this award to Ann Garber Kompaore, who was born in Toronto, Ontario, and grew up in a Mennonite family. Her home church is Listowel Mennonite Church in Listowel, Ontario, where she was licensed for ministry in 2001 as a minister in Bible teaching and translation. Fascinated by languages and the peoples of different cultures, Ann dreamed of being an interpreter at the United Nations. In 1978, she sensed that God was calling her to work among the Sanufo people in Burkina Faso in language analysis and Bible translation. She studied linguistics, specializing in African linguistics, and took courses in theology. In 1982, she was hired by the General Conference Mennonite Church and sent through African Inter-Mennonite Mission to Upper Volta, now Burkina Faso. She lived and worked in the village of Kotura, collecting data for her PhD thesis on the tonal system of the local language Sichite, and helped plant the first Protestant church there. In 1993, she married Pastor Daniel Kompaore, a widower with 5 adult children, and moved to Ouagadougou, the capital city. She began supervising the translation of the New Testament into Sichite under the administration of the National Association for the Translation of the Bible and Literacy. In 1997, she was seconded to Summer Institute of Linguistics in Burkina Faso as a linguistics coordinator and consultant. In that role, she had the opportunity to help linguists with analyses of numerous languages in Burkina Faso, in particular the Gur and Mande languages. In 1997 and 1998, she also had the opportunity to study Hebrew in Israel, which eventually oriented her to translation consultation, which she began with the Burkina Bible Society in 2005. Since 2011, she has worked as a freelancer for Commission to Every Nation, serving as a Bible translation consultant, biblical studies instructor, resource developer, and translation trainer for several African countries, as well as India. The resources she has developed have been used by others throughout the Bible translation world. After stints in Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, and Nigeria, she has continued to teach in biblical institutions in Burkina. Ann has bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in linguistics and has studied about 25 languages. She did studies at AMBS in 1981 and 1982, in 2000, 2001, and 2004, with some online study in between, and received a Master of Arts in Theological Studies with a Biblical Studies concentration from AMBS in 2004. Her thesis focused on exegesis and discourse analysis of the Pentateuch. Ann has published 2 books and numerous articles on translation, including biblical translation. Ann, we honor you for nearly 40 years of service in Burkina Faso in the areas of linguistics analysis, language development, Bible translation, and Bible teaching. I invite you to show the certificate which you are receiving as one of the 2020 recipients of the Alumni Ministry and Service Recognition. Congratulations, Ann, and may God continue to bless your ministry, an honor well deserved.
Congratulations, Ann.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
now invite you to share your reflections, and after she is done, all of you on this Zoom call will have the opportunity to share short comments with Anne. So remain muted at this point.
Well, greetings, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I have to say, though, it feels a little odd to be honored today. I'm thankful, but I'm also a little surprised. I have to admit that a couple of years ago, I said to myself, I probably won't be ever on that list because I no longer work for a Mennonite organization. My work in Bible translation is no longer seen as a priority for Mennonite Church. And I no longer work solely for the Mennonite Church, but for the broader Christian community. I honestly don't know how my name came up on your radar, but I feel blessed to be honored like this. I know that all that I do is grounded in the foundation of my faith as a Christian believer and member of the Mennonite Church. I know too that my training at AMBS contributed to my ministry. Some years ago, I did a little research on Mennonite involvement in Bible translation, and you would be amazed at how many Mennonites have been involved in this ministry, right from the early days of missions. For example, the Dutch Mennonite mission work in Indonesia and AIMM in Africa. In the last 50 years, Mennonites have been involved in both the Bible societies and also Wycliffe Bible translators. In the last few years, an all Mennonite Bible translation organization has been formed called All Nations Bible Translation. I would wager that Mennonites have a higher percentile of people working in Bible translation than any other denomination. Although the recognition I received today was because I was an AMBS student, it is also an honor for all those Mennonites working in Bible translation that you as a Mennonite institution would recognize our work in this ministry, which is foundational for Christian faith worldwide. Without a Bible, there is no church. I would like to first recognize my parents, who, in spite of the fact that we moved around in communities with little or no Mennonite presence, they instilled in me a theology and faith that has stayed with me all my life. If my dad were with us today, I'm sure his heart would be bursting with pride. And I'm thankful to see all my aunts and uncles standing in for him. I come from a heritage of a family who was solidly involved in ministry of some sort, with an uncle, aunt, grandfather, two great-grandfathers who were pastors and evangelists, a great uncle, Chester Wenger, who contributed to the planting of the Mennonite Church in Ethiopia, and a great aunt, Rhoda Wenger, who served in Tanzania, Somalia, and the Virgin Islands. I would like to recognize those churches who nurtured me through adolescence and young adulthood. Valley View Mennonite in London, Ontario. And there's a couple people from London, I think, that are listening to this, where I was baptized and became a member at age 14 under Pastor Ralph Leibold. The Mennonite Church in Joliet, Quebec, where I studied for a year, and in particular the family of Tillman and Janet Martin, who planted in me the sense of faith and mission in daily living. Ottawa Mennonite Church in Ottawa, Ontario, where I learned about Russian Mennonites, and one in particular, Bill Jansen, who encouraged me to accept an invitation to serve as a volunteer in Zaire, now Democratic Republic of Congo, with the Africa Inter-Mennonite Mission and the General Conference Mennonite Church. And then the First Mennonite Church in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, where I studied linguistics at the University of Illinois, most specifically African languages, in preparation for my sense of call among the Sichiti people in Upper Volta, now Burkina. To this day, I have friends there who follow my ministry with interest, and some of them are listening today. In fact, they were the ones who commissioned me for ministry in 1982 and were a support to me when I returned to complete my thesis a few years later. Now, my grandmother always wanted me to go to a Mennonite college, but none of them offered a degree in linguistics. My chosen area of concentration, which was inspired by my early experiences with First Nations languages in Ontario, and by my encounters with languages and Bible translation ministries in the Congo. I think particularly of my next door neighbor in Nyanga, Gimalo Kianza, the Gipendi Bible translator, who is my language tutor, as well as Ben Eidzi, who oversaw the translation of the Chokwe Bible, and Hardy Schroeder, the Kituba translation, who told me that Bible translation work was the most wonderful ministry that one could ever be involved in. I didn't know that I would be eventually involved in it at that time. When AIMM wanted to send me to Upper Volta, now Burkina Faso, they told me I had to go to AMBS for a year in order to get my biblical background, as well as training for missions. So after finishing up my PhD linguistics courses in Illinois, off to Elkhart I went in 1981-82. I was tired of sitting in classes though, taking down notes and writing exams. I had been doing it for too many years. But I loved doing research, as Jake Elias attested when I got a D on my exam and an A on my research paper for his New Testament course. Greek was a whiz with Gertrude Roten. She took a particular liking to me as an aunt of my future colleague in Burkina, Gail Wiebe, now Taves. And Rolf Coetze's courses on Islam and missionary anthropology were particularly interesting and later useful when I moved to the village in Burkina Faso, Koutoura, where I knew nothing of the language and the religions of the Sichiti Senufu people. Gail and I were in Koutoura barely a month, trying to get our feet on the ground, observing the world around us, barely having the greetings on our tongues, when the son of the chief reached out to us, and not us to him. Cheba asked us all kinds of questions about our faith that he kept asking for months on end. He was Muslim. So was his father, but his mom was not. She adhered strictly to the Senufu's traditional religion. We saw Muslim folk religion close up, something that Rolf had mentioned in his classes at AMBS. 11 months later, after hundreds of questions, Cheba took a very brave step of faith in Jesus Christ. And that was the beginning of the faith community among the Sichiti Senufu. Curiously, before we had developed a strategy for reaching out to these people, before we could apply all those good principles of cross-cultural learning and evangelism that we had learned at seminary, we had new believers on our hands that we had to nurture. Well, God helped us and other fellow believers, both mission worker colleagues such as Lauren and Donna Enns and Dennis and Jeannie Rempel, as well as local believers of other ethnic groups, such as Siaka Traore, who came and helped us disciple this small group of believers. Today, long story short, there are several Sichiti-speaking churches, Sichiti Mennonite leaders who participate on the National Mennonite Church Council, and a Sichiti New Testament, completed with the help of the National Bible Translation Organization in Burkina Faso, of which my husband, Daniel, was the first director. Fast forward to 2001. Almost 20 years later, I am now in the capital city of Ouagadougou, married to Daniel Kompaore for almost 10 years. The translation work had been handed over to the Sichiti people with Dauda Traore, soon to be the new head of the translation project. At that time, I was seconded to SIL as the linguistics coordinator of the linguistics work being conducted in some 20 languages. This linguistics research was the foundation for conducting Bible translation in languages that had previously never been written or whose grammar had never been described. However, through some rather traumatic events, I was reminded of my dream to become a Bible translation consultant that I had kept deep inside of me from the time I was in the Congo. I renewed my zeal to learn Hebrew, which I studied in Israel in 1997-98, and sought to take a sabbatical year to continue studying my Hebrew. And what better place to study Hebrew than AMBS in Elkhart, Indiana? Now wait, you say, AMBS really is not exactly the center of Hebrew language studies. Well, perhaps not, but Perry Yoder was there. Actually, I had an ulterior motive for coming to AMBS. I wanted to reconnect with my Mennonite faith base, as was the case when I was young. In Burkina, I was surrounded by non-Mennonite Christian community, and I felt the need to get back to my roots theologically and community-wise. So what was initially just a sabbatical year to do independent study of Hebrew at AMBS turned into a deep degree program thanks to the encouragement of Willard Swartley and the permission of my husband to spend many months away from home. AMBS turned out to be more than a place to study biblical Hebrew. The trauma that I had experienced in the previous years was spiritually draining. I needed someone to accompany me on my journey to spiritual renewal. That person was Erland Waltner. At 90 years old, he was still a source of encouragement as my spiritual director during that year. From the time that I was a small child, the notion of Jesus' instruction to love one's enemy was imprinted in my soul and conscience. It feels like it is a part of my DNA. Mary Church's course on peace and justice helped me put a little theological meat on that notion. It is a challenge to live and practice peace in a world full of conflict and injustice. Oh, how do we know that in Burkina Faso? The answers are not always clear. When I was invited to teach on the topic at Logos University in Burkina Faso, it was not the topic of peace theology that I was asked to teach. The title of my course was The Theology of War in the Bible. Well, and they were asking a Mennonite to teach that? Okay. In the midst of the war on terrorism that we had been living in since 2016, well, you can imagine we had some very interesting discussions, to say the least. And the Hebrew? Perry may well remember that we did not see eye to eye on some things, with me coming from a linguistics background, but the thesis I was able to write on the linguistic structure of biblical law ended up being a resource for classes and workshops. I am thankful for being able to serve as a Bible translation consultant since 2004, working for several organizations and missions in several countries in addition to Burkina Faso. I want to conclude with a special thank you to the Listowel Mennonite Church, who has been a solid supporter for our ministry for the last 20 years. Even though I was no longer working under a Mennonite organization partway through. And to my husband, Daniel, who insisted that I continue my ministry when we married and encouraged me to continue developing my skills. But most of all, with special gratitude to the Lord our God, who has guided me and led me all the way through thick and thin, through joys and trials, showing me what he wants to do and providing people and communities who taught, encouraged, and supported my ministry along the way. Thank you. I probably could say a lot more, but I'll stop here and others can say some remarks or ask questions. Again, thank you.